Okay. So what fiqh was and so on. What else did we discuss? Okay, so before we go into this, okay, so first look at sources of fiqh. So from the sisters, what are the sources of fiqh?
The Quran, the Sunnah, the Ijma.
Good. And okay, so Quran, Sunnah, Ijma, and Qiyas. What's Ijma again, everyone? Consensus. Okay, now who can define what consensus meant?
Agreement between
It's part of it, but it's not a definition, no. From sisters, a definition?
I was going to say when like the Sahabas came together to come to a conclusion of ruling.
That's true. Still not enough to be a definition, though. True, but still not enough to be a definition. So definition has to be very comprehensive and it has to be very watertight as well. So nothing else can come inside it, nothing can escape it. So definition is to be very, very clear. Ijma. Anyone remember? Anyone know any other guesses?
Yeah. A group of scholars agreed something.
That's true. Still not watertight enough. So Tufel, did you want to say something?
Yeah, something is not in Quran or Sunnah, but the scholars are decided, and then that's called Ijma, I think.
That's true. That's true. I'm still looking for more though. Shoaib, what are you going to say?
Oh yeah, I was going to say a similar thing. When something's outside the scope or like a problem that isn't that wasn't present in the previous day and age, when a group of top scholars all agree upon a ruling, then that's the ruling of ijma, basically ruling of consensus.
Okay, good. They're all correct answers, but it's still not a definition. It's not enough to be a definition. Okay, so definition of ijma is when all of the jurists of a particular time period agree upon something. So all of the jurists of a particular time period agree upon a matter. So this is a very technical definition of ijma. So imagine how difficult it is to get ijma. So you can't claim to have ijma on on random stuff. It has to be something which is very serious, and every single jurist knows this is the correct answer. Yeah. As soon as you have a few jurists disagreeing, there's no ijma on this. Yeah. This is a mukhtalafi issue, meaning a issue that has difference of opinion. Yeah.
So when you say of a certain time period,
yeah,
does it have to be in a specific time period? So which means today we can't be.
Can be any era. The jurists of any era agree upon something.
Why is any area important if it doesn't matter when it is?
I'm saying so. What by that wording it means so ijma can still happen today. It could happen in the time of Sahaba. It could happen in the 12th century, 13th. It doesn't matter. So any era.
So why do you have to put that in if it's a general statement?
Okay. So what it is? Let's say. Why did the scholars put that in? That's a good question. It's just to because some scholars did believe that ijma is only confined to the Sahaba, and after that the door of ijma closed. So it's perhaps they mentioned it to keep that door open, because there is that definition out there where ijma is only for the Sahaba, and after that there was no ijma.
What's up?
Okay, so Shaib, I'll come to your question in a minute. So definition of a jurist is generally, so when it comes to being a jurist, is we go by number one, if other scholars consider that person to be a jurist. In Islam, it's all about what others think about you. So that's Imam Malik rahimahullah. He said, I did not start giving fatwa until 70 of the greatest ulama of my time period said I'm worthy of giving fatwa. So it's not that I have knowledge, I think I'm able to. What do other scholars who are of knowledge think about me? So then so let's say if other scholars, generally, so obviously every person will differ from person to person, but the general assumption is that person is a scholar, then you're a scholar. So sometimes let's say a person from here, standard person, they haven't had too much training, but you go to a country that doesn't have an Islamic knowledge. To that people of that country, you guys will be a scholar, isn't it? Because you know the basics of salah, fasting, Yeah, so to those people, you're a scholar here. Does that make sense? So it's relative to, but generally, if you want to see if you're a scholar or not, you look at other scholars. Because the laymen, they don't really, a person that's not a scholar, they can't differentiate between who has knowledge, who doesn't. It's about, if you're a good speaker, we'll think you're a good scholar. If you're not such a good speaker, we're going to think you don't know much. Yeah.
And the difference between a scholar and a jurist is somebody who creates laws, I take it.
Okay, so a scholar is just a person that has a, scholar could be anyone that has a good amount of knowledge, even let's say in tafsir, in hadith, in whatever field. But when you say jurist, it's specific to law. Jurist is specific to law. Scholar is just general. Yes. So Shay, what were you going to say?
No, I was going to make the same point about the definition of jurist, but just to add the point, would the qualification of a jurist be that they can make their own ijtihad on matters? Would that count as like a prerequisite that they can do that for them to be a jurist?
Okay, yeah. So there are many conditions for a person to be able to exercise their own opinion in terms of interpreting Quran and Hadith, and that's restricted to a jurist. And it's not just any jurist; it has to be a top caliber jurist. And there's many rules that Imam Shafi'i discussed, the qualifications and tools a person needs to exercise their own opinion in the matter of Sharia. But yes, it has to be done not just by any jurist, but jurists of the highest caliber. Okay, so that was the definition. Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. Who's heard of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal? Everyone from the sisters, mashallah?
Yes, I have.
Okay. Okay, so Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. So we're going to go into these names, yeah? Not at this stage, but later, it's coming. So Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, he was very against claiming ijma'. So he would say, whoever says there is an ijma' on something, he's a liar. That's what he would say. Because he would say, how do you know every jurist has agreed upon this? Yeah, so he would say, whoever claims ijma', he's a liar. So that's why he would say, he used to specifically tell his students that don't say there is an ijma' or consensus in this issue. He would always say that I do not know of a difference of opinion. So this is the ruling, and I do not know of a difference of opinion. So he was very against it. The Hanafis, they weren't so against, claiming ijma'. They used to do it all the time. The Shafi'is, they weren't, all the students of Imam Shafi'i, they weren't so hesitant. But Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal was. Anyone know why that could be? Why was Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal so against claiming ijma', but the other scholars, like they say, from the Hanafis or Shafi'is, or Malikis even, they weren't as opposed to claiming ijma'?
Wasn't he very literal in a sense? So you'd have to find literally every single jurist on the planet and then get a consensus for it.
That's true. He was literal, but no, that wouldn't affect his claim. Though, because every other scholars would do, the Hanafis would do the same thing. You'd have to make sure that there's no difference of opinion here before they claim ijma'. Anyone know?
Is it due to his time and place that there was a lot of different ideas floating around, more so than previous generations? So it was difficult to gauge, more difficult to gauge on example.
Yes, that's a lot more correct, yes. So Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, he was the late, out of the four Imams that we have in fiqh. So we have Imam Abu Hanifa, we have Imam Shafi'i. So we're going to go into a lot more details. So you don't have to remember all this now. So at the beginning, we have Imam Abu Hanifa, who passed away 150 AH. So in terms of the Prophet ﷺ, which year did he pass away? In terms of years after Hijrah, and which year did he pass away? You know,
after 23 years. After 13 years of Hijrah.
Not 13 years, no, but close. Anyone know? Sorry? You're intelligent, yes, but no. Okay, so mashallah, but very close. So 13 years was the Meccan period. So he stayed in Mecca for 13 years as a prophet, and then he migrated to Medina, and he lived in Medina for 10 years, approximately, and then he passed away. So he passed away right in the beginning of the 11th year, in Rabiul Awwal. So he passed away in the 11th year after Hijrah. So basically he lived in Medina for 10 years and then passed away. So 11th year. So out of the four Imams, so generally the fiqh that we have today is from the four Imams, generally. One of the four Imams anyway. So the earliest of the four Imams was Imam Abu Hanifa. So he passed away 150 AH. So he was born in the by the way, we're gonna have very detailed discussions about these imams. I'm just trying to throw ideas out there. So when we go back to them, it's like, oh yeah, I remember. So just trying to throw ideas out there and, you know, discussions. But we're gonna come to them in a lot of detail. And we will be repeating stuff again and again and again and again, just to make sure all this is ingrained. So that when you, inshallah, you know, when you're going to study different courses with different teachers, you go with ingrained knowledge that, you know, this is the background, rather than, you know, I attended a lecture once. I have no idea what was said in there. It's in my notes somewhere, and those notes are lost. I've attended many of these lectures, and I have no idea what happened. Yeah, the saddest thing is, I went to Turkey for like 2 weeks. It's like crash course in the University of Hadith, Fiqh, everything out there. Yeah, so just full day, just lectures. And so I imagine, like, after 2 weeks, I had a stack of notes. Yeah, I left them at my hotel. I forgot them. So I came to UK. I was so excited to start reading, because, you know, at that time I wasn't focused on memorizing. I was focused on writing everything down. There's so much information you can't, you know. So I was like, you know what, when I come back to England, I'm spend at least like 5 months going over this notes, checking all the references. I opened my suitcase, it's not there. I left it at the hotel on my way out. So I thought to myself, you know what, I'm going to keep it in my side bag so I can read it on the plane and everything. But yeah, it just stayed on the camp. Yeah, I do. So yeah, I remember like some stuff that happened, but obviously most of the information is gone, unfortunately. But anyway, so what was I saying? So Imam Hanifa, yeah, so he's the earliest. So he was born 80 years after Hijrah, and he passed away 150. And then after him was Imam Shafi'i. He was born, and when? Imam Shafi'i was born on the same year that Imam Hanifa died. Some say on the same day that he passed away. So when there's one scholar leaves this world, Allah replaces him with another one. So Imam Shafi'i was born, and he passed away, I believe it was 201. So he lived a relatively short life. So Imam Shafi'i. So he was born in 150, passed away 201. And then after that, you have Imam Malik, which I believe he passed away 179. Imam Malik. So he's the third of the 4 Imams. Imam Malik, 179. And then we have the fourth of the 4 Imams, which is the latest one, which is Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. Imam Ahmad, he passed away 241. So you can see, like, a very far down from the time of the Prophet ﷺ. So during the time of the Imam Abu Hanifa, he met many of the Sahaba. You know, the knowledge was still fresh, and you can allocate where the Sahaba went to. So it's very easier to say, you know what, there's a ijma on this, the consensus in this. Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, the Islamic empire had spread from, you know, vast majority of the country. In the first 100 years, Islam spread from, Spain, North Africa. You had, all the Middle Eastern countries. So literally it's just expanded. Now to say that, there's an ijma in this, you must be very bold and daring to say, the whole Muslim world agrees with this. So that's why, to understand the fiqh of the 4 Imams, you need to understand their time, you need to understand which country they lived in, you need to understand their time periods, why, so all these factors differ in terms of their legal opinions on matters. Okay, but anyway, and we discussed the 5 objectives of the Sharia. 5 objectives of the Sharia. Let's hear some. What was one of them? To protect life and property and intellect and religion and dignity. Good. Okay, and then we discussed speculative and definitive rulings, isn't it? Yeah. So majority of rulings in Islam are speculative. Yeah. So majority of rulings in Islam are speculative. Speculative means there's room for different opinions here. Yeah, the ruling is not absolutely clear-cut, 100%. There can be differences here. So majority of rulings in Islam is speculative. And some of the commands in Islam are? Good. Everyone from the sisters, some of the commands in Islam are? Definitive. Good. Okay, the fact that some were intentionally made definitive, that means the rest was it accidentally made speculative? No, so the rest were intentionally made speculative to allow room for ease and allow room for difference of opinion. Yeah. And then I mentioned that piety is not that you make everything haram. Sometimes we have a thingy complex where the more pious we are, the more we're able to say everything's haram. And this is haram, this is haram, this is haram, this is haram. According to many people, by the way, sisters being here is haram. In the masjid, haram. So So it's not that the more pious you are, the more things you're able to make haram. Or mashallah, this person, he said this is halal, so he's not as pious. No. Yeah. So knowledge, the more vast your knowledge is, the more you can accommodate different opinions. And the more narrow your knowledge is, the more you think, the less you've been exposed to different opinions, the more you think, my version is right and everyone else is wrong. So that's why it's very important to understand differences and why they arise, where they arise. So you can think, even though you don't have to follow that opinion, but you can appreciate where they're coming from, which is very important. And because I think, especially within our Indian subcontinent, like this, we have been deprived of this general. So let's say the Arabs, generally they understand different opinion, they understand the Imam, they understand, why different opinion exists. It's part of their culture. When they teach, they talk about all these sorts of things. Whereas when we're growing up, we're only taught one version of Islam, and then when we're older, we see people like doing different stuff. It's like, hey, this guy Muslim is raising his hands before ruku. So we start having all these weird opinions and thoughts about others. And why? It's because we haven't been exposed to it. We haven't understood how fiqh works. But it doesn't mean that we become arrogant as well. So sometimes what happens is, because I know there's a different opinion, I'm going to on purpose do it different to everyone else around me, so that people start arguing with me and I can debate them. So it can lead to arrogance as well. So sometimes, yes, knowing different opinions is good, but you have to deal with wisdom as well. So I remember I was reading one post of an Imam. He's a very famous Imam, very famous. So he's invited by the Bengali community to lead the Jummah Salah. So actually, I respect this Imam a lot. So mashallah, and may Allah give us the ability to benefit from him and Allah preserve him. But what happened was, I was reading his post, I was shocked, like, someone of this caliber doing this, like, no, it's not right. So let's say he was invited by Bengali community to lead the Jummah Salah, which is a big thing. So in the Bengali community, like wearing a hat is a very, very big thing, isn't it? Imagine Imam, wearing a hat. So, whoa, is he an Imam? What kind of guy is he? Is he Muslim? Like all these questions be thrown around. Yeah. So yes, you're a big Imam, but you have to be understanding of the temperament of the people as well. Yeah. So now, yes, let's say, even if you're of the opinion that wearing a hat is into Sunnah, which is fine, there's nothing wrong with that. But then going into a Bengali community, leading the Jummah Salah with it's a massive masjid, like 600, 700, 800 people, it's easy, just wear a hat. Yeah, and just lead the Salah. There'll be no issues, no things. And then if you want to educate the people, by the way, it's not, you can educate them later. But your intention is, take off the hat and then lead the Salah, you're just causing fitna, you're going to cause fights, you're going to, that doesn't need to take place. So just because I'm technically right does not mean I should do this to create an argument or fitna and things like that. Yeah, so the more understanding of fiqh that we have, the more we're able to tolerate different opinions and so on and so on. And understand where and how to apply. Anyway, so okay, let's continue now. Where's all this wind coming from? Is the outside door, sisters, is it open?
Yeah.
Maybe if you just close it, then the wind will stop. And if the online students have any questions, you can use the chat. So I can see the chat now. So last week is a bit disorientated, but I've managed to find out, see the chat. And you can and if you have a question as well, you can just unmute yourself and ask as well. So sometimes I won't see your hand. Shaib, do you have a question?
No, you just asked a question earlier if you knew who someone was, and then I put my hand up to raise that I do know who that is.
Okay, and okay, there's a lower the hand button as well. So if you don't have a question anymore, you can just lower it, so then I won't call you. Okay, so let's continue with our history of fiqh. So we're going to start Seerah today as well, inshallah, hopefully. Okay, so we're starting today with the era of the companions. So last time we talked about how the Prophet he did his own ijtihad. We also talked about how he made mistakes in personal matters, but when it came to the Sharia, Allah always corrected him. So now in terms of, after the Prophet he was a prophet for how many years? Everyone? 23 years. And then he passed away. Which year of Hijrah did he pass away? 11th year. Right in the beginning of the 11th year. Yeah. How many years did he live for, the Prophet? 63 years. First 40 years was before prophethood. So at the age of 40 he became prophet. How many years did he live in Mecca? 13 years. Yeah, also, and so all the sisters try to answer as well, so I know that we're on the same page. So how many years did he live in Mecca as a prophet? 13 years. And in Medina? That's one sister. How many years in Medina? 10, mashallah. Okay, so I'm going to repeat these time frames so we have all these time frames in our mind, yeah? Because this is very important when it comes to studying. Okay, so content, what we're going to do today, okay, so Quran and Sunnah is all based upon, Fiqh is based upon Quran and Sunnah. So what is the role of the intellect? Does that mean we are a nation that completely shuns intellect and we just go by what the scripture says, or how does intellect work? Can intellect override Quran and Sunnah? Let's say logic says one thing, Quran says one thing, which one do we follow? Logic says one thing, the Sunnah says one thing, which one do we follow? What if there's a verse in the Quran completely goes against logic? Which one do we follow? These are discussions that were had before. And we have a group which were known as the Mu'tazila. So they said whenever the Quran or the Sunnah contradicts our intellect, we reinterpret the Quran and Sunnah to match our intellect. So they denied many verses of the Quran based upon the intellect. They denied, let's say, punishment of the grave. How can that take place? Doesn't make sense. So they reinterpreted the hadiths to, it doesn't mean the punishment of the grave, it means something else. Or let's say they said, so they were called the Mu'tazila, which were there very early on in time of the Tabi'in. Very early on. Or let's say they denied, what's they deny? They denied seeing Allah. So the verse of the Quran, إِلَى رَبِّهَا نَاظِرَةٌ, that they will be looking towards their Lord. So that how can we see Allah? Now, our human eyes perceive Allah. How's that even possible? The logic does not make sense. Yeah. So they said, no, you know what? Nadhira doesn't mean looking here, it means waiting. So they reinterpret many of these things. Okay, so then we're going to look at the hadith of Mu'adh. This is a very important hadith. We will need to know this hadith of Mu'adh. So this is known as the hadith of Mu'adh ibn Jabal. And just quick look at the Khulafa Rashidun without going into detail. Ijtihad in time of Sahaba, the companions moved to different places, the companions became centers of learning, and muftis from the companions, and reasons for differences of opinion. So we probably won't look into that today. Okay, so what is the role of the intellect? So number one, and just a reminder, so all the slides is given to you straight after the lesson on the Telegram group. So anything that you don't want to write, which is on the slides, you do not need to write them down. So however you want to use the slides is up to you. Generally, what we used to do whenever our teacher would give us slides, I used to go home and print them out and just make new notes on top of them. So however you want to use the slides, or you can just use them as refreshers. Okay, so number one is qiyas. So qiyas requires intellect, isn't it? Yeah, so when you have a known ruling extended into, and by the way, I was actually supposed to ask you what's the role of the intellect, but it accidentally just came up on the slide. So, so yeah, you guys go away with it. Anyone know what the word illah means? To understand the illah. This is a very important word for anyone that wants to derive rules or understand the crux of matters. Illah. It translates to underlying principle. The word illah translates to underlying principle. So the main thing is understanding the underlying principle behind matters. So for example, let's say alcohol is haram. Yes? Why is alcohol haram? Is it because it's called alcohol? Is that the underlying principle? So anything that we call alcohol is going to be haram. So if you understand the name to be the underlying principle, then anything that has a different name, you're going to consider halal, isn't it? So how you apply Islamic knowledge depending on how you've understood the illah, what the underlying principle is, isn't it? So let's say Allah says in the Quran, alcohol is haram. Yeah. So that if the underlying principle of that is because you're going to get drunk, yeah. So what would that mean? So how would that affect the legal ruling? Would mean that whenever you're not going to get drunk, then you can drink it, yeah? Or so what, let's say we have wine over here, and Allah says wine is haram, yeah? So wine generally, let's say it's red in color, this one, yeah? This particular one is red in color. So if you think the underlying principle for this bottle of wine being haram because it's red, then you're gonna have very funny scenarios you're gonna come up with. As long as it's not red or it's blue wine or green wine, then it's halal. Does that make sense? Yeah. So what is the underlying principle of alcohol being haram? Yeah, because it clouds your judgment, isn't it? Yeah. So now this is the correct underlying principle why alcohol is haram, because it clouds your judgment. Now that we've understood the correct underlying principle, we can now apply this to new scenarios. So anything that clouds your judgment. Let's say cannabis, that clouds your judgment. When you smoke cannabis, clouds your judgment, or anything else new that comes out, if it's clouding your judgment, then in the same way or same way or similar to alcohol, then it becomes haram. Yeah.
Isn't it the fact that it leads to clouding judgment, not to the point of clouding judgment? It leads to it as well.
It has a potential to, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, has a potential to.
yeah, but things like in bread, you have alcohol and stuff. Anyway, that's not clouding judgment.
Yeah, so yeah, that doesn't really have the potential to, isn't it? Yeah. And but we also have in the hadith as well, whatever is haram in the large quantity is haram in a small quantity. So you can't take, if let's say you take a bit of red wine and put it in food just for the taste, just few drops, it's still haram because it has the potential to. This is a clear hadith of Prophet ﷺ. Whatever is ما أسكر كثيره فقليله حرام. Whichever intoxicates in a large quantity, its small consumption of its small quantity is also haram. So if it has the potential to intoxicate, but bread has alcohol in it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So should that be haram?
Some bread, that's not.
Yeah, so shouldn't those breads be haram?
When they get evaporated in the process, it's
Not all, most of it, I think, but not all.
not a large portion of it.
Yeah, some still remains though.
But is it the way you say if you add to it,
Mm.
or if it's a natural process? Is that relevant?
It's not, but in all Pepsi and Coca-Cola, there is alcohol.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about bread first. From a juristic perspective, so with that, so it can't be just I think, yeah. So from a juristic perspective, what would you call it? Halal and why? Haram and why?
I think the ijma is that's halal.
Okay, possible. Okay, that would be a juristic answer. Because do we know any Sahaba that forbade it? No one, did anyone say bread? Yeah, so this is a type of ijma. Yeah. So you have ijma sukuti as well, where the ummah has been silent on an issue and everyone's been doing it. Yeah, so this is called ijma sukuti. It's a silent ijma. Because if it was haram, bread is such a common thing. At least some Sahaba was broken up against it. Yeah, so Sahaba used to, so the actions of the Sahaba here, that's what I actually said. It's a silent ijma. Yeah, so these things were eaten by the Sahaba and they were silent to them. So generally, we say that those alcohols that are produced naturally based upon the Sahaba's actions, they are fine. Yeah, so even like fruit juices, I think, have alcohol, a small amount, and so on.
That comes to the point where can you cook with alcohol because it gets evaporated?
Okay, so alcohol here is an impurity. So if you add it, so if you take an impure substance and you deliberately add it to food, you've made the rest of the food impure. So even if it's evaporated, the ruling of it still being impure is still there. And impure, something which is impure, we can't consume it. So you can't add alcohol to food even if it's going to get evaporated. Does that make sense? Okay, so number one, to understand the illah and for qiyas, understand the maqasid al-sharia. What is maqasid al-sharia? English translation of the maqasid al-sharia? Yes, the objectives of the sharia. To understand, because that takes, the Prophet did not say in the hadith that these are the purposes of the sharia. This was actually extracted by the jurists, that from the large body of fiqh that we have, we can understand that sharia came to preserve these things. Yeah, so this is all done by intellect. And just deriving rules from the sources requires intellect, isn't it? Yeah. And generally, so according to Sunni Islam, the highest authority, so aql is not a source of sharia though. Yeah, aql, intellect, is not a source of the sharia. It can help you understand the sharia, it can help you derive rulings from the sharia, but it's not a source of the sharia. That's why when someone says, I think, when it comes to Islamic law, does Islamic law care what they think? No, yeah. To rudely put it, that's how you rudely put it, yeah. Because my thinking is not a source of the sharia. But if I'm explaining something from the source of the sharia, or I'm extracting something from the source of the sharia using my thinking, then that's fine. But if you have no sources in mind, you have no text of the sharia in mind, or the sunnah or the sahaba, and then you are saying I think, then this is very problematic. Yeah. Okay, hadith of Mu'adh. This is very important. And I'm going to ask you, what does it teach us? What does hadith teach us? So Mu'adh ibn Jabal radiallahu anhu narrated, and he was known as the mufti of this ummah, that when God's messenger sent him to Yemen, he asked him how he would judge when the occasion arose. So the Prophet ﷺ, near the end of his lifetime, he wanted Mu'adh radiallahu anhu to go to Yemen to be a judge there. So to invite them towards Islam and then stay there and to teach them the religion and be a judge there. And then he asked him, so this is spontaneous. So he asked him spontaneously, Mu'adh, so when you go to Yemen and the people ask you different questions, how will you respond to them? With what? So now he immediately said he would judge in accordance with the God's book. And then he asked, what would he do if he could not find guidance in God's book? Meaning the issue was not clearly mentioned there. And he replied, he would act in accordance with God's messenger's sunnah. So look towards a hadith basically. He asked what he would do if he could find no guidance in God's messenger's sunnah, and he replied, he would do his best to form an opinion and spare no pains, meaning to basically exert all ability to try and form an opinion. God's messenger tapped him on his chest and said, praise be to Allah who has disposed his messenger's messenger to something which God's messenger is pleased. So this is narrated in Abu Dawud and Tirmidhi. Okay, so what does it tell us? First of all, what do we understand from this hadith? Anything.
So
Obvious stuff and difficult stuff. So
so step by step, which thing to follow, the Quran first and then Sunnah and then Ijma.
Is that ijma?
Ijma or Ijtihad, yeah.
Ijtihad or qiyas, you could say, yeah? Okay, so good. So we understand the hierarchy, yeah? We understand the hierarchy of the sources. Quran first, and then Sunnah, and then qiyas or ijtihad over here. Okay, what else do we understand from this?
But the Prophet ﷺ explicitly approved ijtihad.
Okay, good. So the Prophet ﷺ improved that he expected his companions to be doing ijtihad. What else do we understand from this? Anything that we can understand from this? Sisters, feel free to tell us as well. What else do we understand from this?
That if you don't understand a ruling, then you shouldn't become complacent about how you act on something, and that you should put all your effort into finding out what the right thing to do.
Okay, good. So it's our responsibility when we don't know the Quran and Sunnah, we need to try and exert all efforts. Good. Actually, there's one issue here is the sisters. Okay, so how many sisters are there at the moment? Fine. Okay. So basically, it'd be good for me to know you guys. So who's there as well? So it'd be good if, let's say, if you answer a question, just say your name so I know who's speaking. Then I can just. So it'd be good to know like who's answering and where the students are at, etc. So I can see the brothers a lot easier, but the sisters like so the realm. I have no idea what's going on there. And who was that? Just answered the last question.
Mariam.
Okay, mashallah. Okay, what else do we understand? Anything else I can possibly understand from this hadith? Anyone? Before I say a few things?
What the status of Mu'adh?
States of Mu'adh, yes, okay, fair enough. So he's understood. Yeah. Okay, one very important thing is, he said these answers spontaneously, isn't it? Which shows what? The Sahaba, they all understood the hierarchy of fiqh. Yeah. So the Sahaba understood that the Prophet within his lifetime already trained the Sahaba how to think as a jurist. So he wasn't telling him, by the way, Mu'adh, this is how you're going to do it. Mu'adh was responding to him and telling him, this is how I'm going to rule. Yeah. And the Prophet, he became happy that, alhamdulillah, I've taught my companions how to arrive at ruling. So the Prophet within his lifetime is one of his missions to train his companions, which is very, very important. So we train our students to learn how to think as a jurist. So when I'm gone, I have students there that can do my job basically. And that's what the Prophet was doing. So Sahaba, they knew this. The Sahaba generally knew the hierarchy of sources. So that's one of the most important things that we understand. And what does it mean? So Mu'adh, right in his last thing, he said he would do his best to form an opinion. So in today's day and age, what would you call that? So someone said ijtihad. What would that ijtihad entail, more specifically?
Consensus or?
Consensus, it wouldn't be consensus, because consensus is just asking everyone, isn't it? So he would do his best to form an opinion. How would they form an opinion, basically? What do you do? So
Follow all the evidence and see what kind of place to write, use the akhl.
This is referring to when there's no evidences, isn't it? And there's no clear evidence, sorry.
But like, for example, the alcohol situation you mentioned, like.
Good, so what's the word I'm looking for? He would do?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, so qiyas is one of them. So he'd take a known matter and extend it. Or in that time, qiyas was not defined. So they would actually go even with the spirit of the Sharia. So a person that's generally knows Quran and Hadith inside out, you read all Quran verses, you read all the Hadith, you gain like a mastery of the subject. You understand the spirit, the mindset. Even in like unknown situations, you know what this person would want, isn't it? So this is the level that the Muftis and Sahaba were. They would judge according to the mindset and the spirit of the Sharia as well. So this is referring to both qiyas, explicitly using qiyas, and also just judging according to the spirit of the Sharia, spirit of the Quran. Okay, so now moving on to, so now actually the topic of discussion is the Khulafa Rashidun. So the rightly guided caliphs. So because we're supposed to talk about, last week we talked about fiqh in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, didn't we? Yeah, so now fiqh in the time of the Sahaba. Just a show of hands, who knows who the Khulafa Rashidun are? The rightly guided caliphs. From the sisters? Who knows who they are? Say your names. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, sometimes I'm just going to ask questions just so I know how to take everything. Yeah. Okay, so the Khulafa Rashidun. So they are referred to as the rightly guided caliphs. So the Prophet said in one hadith that after me there will be rightly guided caliphs. And in another narration, he said the rightly guided caliphate will last for 30 years. So this is an explicit hadith. The rightly guided caliphate would last for 30 years. These are explicit hadiths. So now that's why the first 30 years is very significant on especially who the rightly guided caliphs are. And another hadith the Prophet said that alaykum bisunnati wa sunnati al-khulafa ar-rashidin al-mahdiyyin, that hold steadfast unto my sunnah and also the sunnah of the rightly guided caliphs. The sunnah. So this is a command, just how we hold onto the Quran and the sunnah. That's exactly the same way we hold onto the sunnah of the rightly guided caliphs. So who they are is very significant in Islam. That's why we need to know who these people are and also what happened in their time periods as well. So who was the first one from the sisters?
Abu Bakr radiallahu.
Sorry, say that again.
Abu Bakr radiallahu.
Okay, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. So first one. Okay, the Prophet era, 23 years, keep it in 12th of Rabiul Awwal, 11 AH. Okay, we already know that, isn't it? That's all common knowledge now, mashallah. Okay, Abu Bakr ibn Abi Quhafa, 2 years and a few months. That's how long he ruled for. Hey, you know this stuff, isn't it, right? Mashallah, I'm going to ask you the next question. Okay, so Abu Bakr, so after the Prophet passed away, 11 AH, they immediately, on that very same day that they passed away, they pledged allegiance to Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. So from that very same day, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu became the Khalifa. So he was, we're not going to go into his detail now. So he was the closest companion of the Prophet ﷺ and the most eligible for this. And there was about 2-year difference between him in terms of age, between him and the Prophet ﷺ. So he was the closest friend of the Prophet ﷺ and also the most worthy in terms of merit in Islam. So to be specific, generally most scholars, they say it was 2 years, 3 months and 10 days to be specific. 2 years, 3 months and 10 days, his Khilafah. Okay, and Rahi after Abu Bakr was? But that's not the question I wanted to ask you. The question I wanted to ask you was how many years did you rule for? Right.
Was it around 20 years? Was it 10?
10 years, mashallah. 10 years, good. Yeah. So roughly, or probably give or take, that could be like 10 years, a few months, but just round it down to 10 years. So the era of Umar ibn al-Khattab. So he ruled for 10 years. So again, he was the second of the best companions after Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. Okay, and anyone know who is next? Uthman radiallahu anhu. How many years did he rule for?
There's 12 already gone.
But there's a lot of variables to play with, so it's not a very big chance you're going to get correct. Anyone know? Like Uthman radiallahu was the longest of the Khilafah. So he ruled for 12 years. 12 years and a few months. And lastly was? Ali radiallahu anhu. Ali radiallahu anhu ruled for 5 years. Okay. So at this stage, this is how much we need to know. So I'm not going to go into details. If anyone wants to know any more details on this, I can give you some recommended reading later. Actually, I had some things typed up as well regarding brief summary. So 1 page on each of the khilafas, just to so you know what happens. If anyone wants that, just remind me and I'll send that over.
Just one quick question.
Yeah.
Obviously, after the Prophet peace be upon him died, there was a few days before they nominated the next one.
Actually, it happened on the same day.
But he was it. I thought it was a few days until they buried him.
No, it happened on the same day.
Same day. So each one of them was the same day, was it?
Abu Bakr was the same day. Umar was the same day. Uthman radiallahu anhu. That might have been a few days. And Ali radiallahu anhu, a long story. Okay, so until Abu Bakr, he became a Khalifa the very first day. So as soon as the Prophet passed away, the Muslims from Makkah, they met the Muslims from Medina and they decided amongst themselves. And this is one of the reasons why Ali radiallahu was actually upset. Because Ali radiallahu how was he related to the Prophet? Good, son-in-law and cousin. So he was an immediate family member. So what would he have been busy doing at that time? The body, burial, all these, family arrangements, so many things. Now, without even consulting him, the rest of the Muslim community already elected leader. So number one is, in his heart, he was very close to the Prophet. So what do you think, what did he have in his heart at the time? Like, wasn't I, the candidate at least? That would be there. So he was a human. And number two, okay, even if I'm not a candidate, but isn't my opinion important? And he was a very great Sahabi, by the way. The Prophet said that Ali is the door to all knowledge. So to leave out, so that's why he had some grievances. So the Shias, they exploit that and say, they take his grievances to another level and say, you know what, he completely rejected Abu Bakr, Umar, and he was a right thing. So, there's a lot of stuff taken out of context. But yeah, so he actually didn't pledge allegiance for the first 6 months to Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, only after Fatima radiallahu anhu died, and then he pledged his allegiance. On the other hand, we had the Sunnis that say, no, he had no problem with it whatsoever. He's completely fine. The reason why he didn't pledge his allegiance because he's busy tending to his wife Fatima. But if you actually think about it, yes, you're tending to your wife Fatima, but it doesn't stop you from taking out 2 minutes and pledging your allegiance to the public. So we try and cover up as much as possible and say, no, he's absolutely fine. But no, we have to put them out there. They were humans at the end of the day. And these differences arose within the Sahaba as well. And we'll go into that, at a later stage, inshallah. So he ruled for 2 years and a few months. So his rule was very quick. So he passed away, he became ill later on and he passed away. So I'll do, how long? 1.5 hours. I'm just thinking how to spend some time on the wudu, spend some time on Sirah today as well. So we'll spend half an hour, isn't it? So when did we start this? 30:30, 3:30? Okay, so we'll do about 15 minutes of this. So I'm not going to go through the entire slide, and then we'll spend some time for the wudu stuff and some time for Sirah, inshallah. So in 15 minutes we'll have a break, yeah? In 10 to 15 minutes we'll have a break. Okay, so I'll just finish on. I'll just elaborate a bit more on this. Inshallah, be beneficial for everyone. Yeah? Okay. So Abu Bakr radiallahu, so in his era, it was very short. So what was anyone that was the first thing that he had to deal with? Or first 2 issues, yeah? The wars of Ridda, yeah. So Ridda is apostasy. So as soon as the Prophet passed away, we had many people, so many Arabs outright said, okay, we don't believe in Islam anymore. So they came into Islam much later stage. They didn't really know much about Islam. Now that the Prophet passed away, they've got an excuse. You know what? We don't. So we had many of the Arab tribes started leaving Islam. Many Arab tribes started refusing to give zakat now. So they said, okay, we should give zakat to the Messenger of Allah. We're not going to give zakat to you, because in those days the zakat was collected by officials from the Prophet ﷺ, isn't it? Now there's no official, the Prophet is not there to send out anyone to collect zakat. So they said, we're going to refuse to give zakat. And Abu Bakr thought, this is a very, the Prophet ﷺ has just passed away, and one of the pillars of Islam is already dying out. Imagine what's going to happen in the next 100 years. So he had to take a very firm stance on this. So that's one aspect he was dealing with. And many delegations came to the Prophet ﷺ and said, to Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, they were saying that we want to remain a Muslim and want to, be Muslims, but we don't want to pray Salah. Salah is difficult. So even in those days, yeah, Salah difficult. And they refused. And the Prophet and Abu Bakr dealt with them very harshly, because he thought that if I tolerate them softly, what's going to happen later, they'll come and other people will come, and they'll be like, so he's very harsh against them. And they actually got so angry, they went out, mobilized an army, and they wanted to attack. They tried to attack Medina, but so all these issues were taking place. So you have, and so on the other hand, so on one hand, these are all called apostasies, yeah.
When you say harsh, what do you do?
Just rebuked them, like told them off, basically. Yeah. No, he just told them off really badly. So that's on one side. These are called the wars of Ridda. So what Abu Bakr had done to retaliate, he sent out armies to fight them. And they said, so firstly, they would obviously bring them back to Islam and say, these are the commands of Allah, come back to Islam. And if they refused, then he would fight them. And the second thing is then we had the false prophets. So Musaylim al-Kallab, and you have quite a few others that claimed the prophethood straight after the Prophet passed away. So on one side, he's dealing with the apostates, on the other side, he's dealing with the false prophets. So his rule was significant, was to consolidate the Islamic empire at the time. Yeah, so it's basic consolidation stage. So as soon as the Prophet passed away, everything went into chaos. And that's why the later scholars like Yahya ibn Ma'in and other scholars would say, if two people did not exist, we would not have Islam as it is today. First is Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, and the second is? Anyone know from the sisters? Second is? Sorry, someone from online? I don't know why the voice is correct for that. Sorry, someone from online said something? Aisha?
Yeah.
No Aisha. Okay, the second is Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. Yeah, he's known as the Imam of Ahl Sunnah. He's the Imam of all the people who claim to follow the Sunnah. Why? It's a very important story. Yeah. So he is, let's say, even if we do not follow his fiqh, but he is still our Imam. Because he went through a lot, and he went through a lot of challenges, and he saved Islam from being changed. So his life is very important. We'll go through when we come to him. Right now it's still in the Sahaba's era, so we're going to work our way down, inshallah. Okay, so Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu and Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. Okay, so his era was consolidation. So consolidating Islamic foundations, and then right at the end, he started focusing on expansion. So he sent out one army towards Asham. Which empire was in Sham? Sham is like Syria and Lebanon, Jerusalem. Roman Empire, good. So he actually sent out one army towards that way near the end of his lifetime. And he sent out one army towards Iraq and Iran, that direction, so northeast. Which empire was there? Persian Empire, good, yeah. Yeah, towards there. So, but before the armies could come back, he actually passed away. Yeah, so but after he passed away, let's say the armies returned victorious. So he started focusing on expansion near the end after it consolidated. So no expansion generally took place in the time of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. Now the expansion phase started with Umar radiallahu anhu. That's when Umar radiallahu anhu, so he's basically reaping the fruits of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu's consolidation of the how we consolidated the Muslim Ummah. So Umar radiallahu anhu, his full focus was expansion. So he wanted to expand towards the northeast with the Persian Empire, and then the northwest towards the Roman Empire, and so on and so on. So in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, the Arabian Peninsula generally was under Muslim rule. That's immediately. But Umar radiallahu anhu, that's when it expanded far and wide. So let's say by the end of Umar radiallahu anhu's Khilafah, the Persian Empire came to an end, generally. So the Persian Empire was a massive empire, ruled for thousands of years. It's a massive empire, one of the superpowers of the time. And they ruled Iraq, Iran, and all these lands, which was basically 99% of it was in Muslim rule by the end of Umar radiallahu anhu. And then by the end of Umar radiallahu anhu, the Byzantine Empire was either crippled, and half or 3/4 of it belonged to the Muslims. And two of the greatest superpowers of the time, and how I can't remember which non-Muslim it was. How he puts it is literally like Eskimos getting together and taking over Russia and China. it's mind-boggling how can these people starting from a tribe in in the Arabian desert that no one wanted to rule over, have no experience in warfare, military, in even like traveling by sea and all these sort of things, how they managed to get everything together and take over the greatest superpowers of their time. It's unbelievable. Yeah, even non-Muslims like how is this possible? But that's what they did. Uthman radiallahu anhu, in his time, that's when the first naval was formed in terms of like going to other countries by ship. Umar didn't like that. So because the Arabs, they're used to just the desert stuff and walking around. So this was very new to them, going by ship. So he didn't like that. So he didn't give any of the Sahaba permission. To Muawiyah radiallahu anhu. Everyone heard of Muawiyah? What do you know about Muawiyah? He was what?
He was from relation to Usman.
Okay, good. So he was from the same tribe as Uthman. What else do we know about Muawiyah?
He was a Khatib Wahi.
Good. He used to write to Wahi of the Prophet. He's more than a governor.
He's the first dynastic.
Good, yes. So after Ali radiallahu anhu, he was the Khalifa after Ali radiallahu anhu. And he turned into a dynasty where he passed it on to his family members and so on. So that's when the Umayyad dynasty started from Muawiyah radiallahu. Yeah. Anyone know how many years he ruled for? Muawiyah? He ruled for 20 years. 20 years. Yeah, longer than all the previous Khulafa before him. 20 years. But again, we're going to discuss this stuff in a bit more detail. Okay, so then we have, so Umar, that's what happened in the time of Umar. I'm going to give very, 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 very brief summaries. So in time of Umar, like Jerusalem was conquered, which includes Palestine, came to Muslim hands. You had Egypt, you had Damascus, full Iraq and Iran, which was the base of empire. So I think I said Egypt. So basically all these countries on that side. So imagine like how vast it became literally within now 12 years of the Prophet passing away. All these countries belonging to Muslims. And then you have Uthman radiallahu anhu. After that, then you have Uthman radiallahu anhu. First 6 years, so now his khilafah is split into two parts. First 6 years and the last 6 years. First 6 years, and again, consolidation. So not much expansion took place. A lot of it was, let's say, after he passed away, Uthman radiallahu anhu was a lot soft. He was a very soft, but he's a complete opposite to Umar radiallahu anhu. Umar radiallahu anhu was very strong and on that aggressive type, and whatever he says goes, and very strict with his rules and everything. Yeah. Where Uthman radiallahu anhu is complete soft on the other side. So people that were scared to do anything in the time of Umar, these are the people like they took advantage of Uthman because they knew how soft he was. So let's say Muawiyah radiallahu anhu, he asked Umar for permission to put together the first Muslim naval fleet. Umar radiallahu anhu, he said, all right, no, I'm not going to I don't give you permission. So then this time he went to Uthman radiallahu anhu and asked him the same question. But Uthman radiallahu anhu, first thing after Uthman told him was, I was there when you asked Umar radiallahu anhu. And I was one of the people that was there to sign that he said no and to give you the letter. That he's that right, now you're asking me. And then Muawiyah radiallahu anhu is like, you're not like Umar, just give me permission, it's fine. So okay, I'll give permission. So that's how Uthman radiallahu anhu was. It was very soft. In the time of Umar radiallahu anhu, he forbade the elite of the Sahaba to leave Medina. They were not allowed to leave from Medina. They had to live and reside there. Anyone know why?
To prevent them, I think.
To prevent them from?
To preserve like knowledge and stuff in he was afraid that it was just gonna diminish. I think the basic reason that they don't want to lose people who remember Quran or something like that.
Quran, by this stage, majority of many of the Sahaba, thousands and thousands and thousands, had memorized the Quran at this stage. So it wasn't mainly because imagine Medina, such a small desert, so small tribe, small city. And now from Medina, Umar was ruling half of the Byzantine Empire, is ruling, from the small tribe, ruling the entire Iraq, Iran, everything. And now so many new matters will arise in terms that we need judgments for in Islam. These situations did not arise in the time of the Prophet ﷺ. Now, is Umar supposed to deal with, come with answers from the Quran and Hadith by himself? He needs a good shura. He needs the elite of the Sahaba to give him opinions. That's very important. And if they scatter, these Sahaba, obviously, when people need knowledge, they're going to go to Sahaba. And because they're not doing it through shura, everyone's going to have different opinions, isn't it? So now right from the day one, everyone, the opinions in Islam were very, very diverse, and he didn't want that. He wanted the elite of the Sahaba to be unified. So that's why he would keep a good shura of the elite Sahaba with him in Medina to unify them. And so you can use them for shura. But when Uthman radiallahu anhu, but the Sahaba, they weren't content just staying in Medina. The Sahaba, they wanted to give their life for the sake of deen. They wanted to defend the borders of Islam. They were very heroic, brave people. They weren't content just sitting at home. But Umar, he just did not give them permission. This was his policy. No one dared to, go against what Umar said. Yeah, the Sahaba, by the way, they disagreed with Umar. This is very important. Aisha radiallahu anha, she disagreed with Umar, so many of Umar's policies. But what they didn't do, they still acknowledged that he is the best amongst us, so we're going to follow him. That's the difference between us and the Sahaba. Sometimes what happens, let's say we have a leader, or let's say even we have imams, yeah? So let's say imams in masjids or imams in general in our communities, yeah? So what happens is they'll have different opinions, yeah? So now, so the imam is that person who's the most knowledgeable in the community, isn't it? He's the most knowledgeable and should be in piety as well, yeah? So now what happens is, when the difference between us and the Sahaba is when they differed with Umar, they still obeyed him because they understood that he's the most knowledgeable. But the difference between us and Sahaba is we obey when we want to, and when we think that, he's made a mistake, our obedience is completely gone. That's the difference between us. But the Sahaba, they still obeyed, even when they disagreed, because they understood that, he's the most knowledgeable, even if my personal opinion disagrees, but my job is to follow that person which is most knowledgeable. Sahaba, they had that. But when it came to Uthman radiallahu anhu, the elite Sahaba who had to stay in Medina, they obviously, what do you think they done? They took their chance. Chance with Uthman radiallahu anhu. So they went to Uthman. Uthman, give us permission to leave. We want to join this battle. We want to go in this, over there, over there. And the time of Uthman radiallahu anhu, all the Sahaba, they scattered into different places. So the first 6 years was still expansion. So within the time of Uthman, let's say Cyprus came into Islam. The Sahaba, with the Muawiyah radiallahu anhu, he went to Cyprus. And they conquered Cyprus. This is a European country, isn't it? Is it? Yeah, and the surrounding islands as well. So imagine Islam came into Europe within 20 years of the Prophet passing away, came into Europe. But yes, that was by benefit of Muawiyah radiallahu anhu. Because obviously Uthman, he didn't know too much about navals and traveling on ships and how safe it was. So anyone know the condition that Uthman then gave Muawiyah? So Uthman said to Muawiyah, okay, you want to take Muslim men, put them on ships, and it's in a dangerous scenario, they all could drown. So what he said was, I'll give you permission to take a Muslim army by ship on the condition that you take your wife. So he made Muawiyah take it. So because obviously you're going to be very protective of your family members, isn't it? Yeah. So he just wanted to see how much of a trust Muawiyah then had. Like, does he care about the Muslim army just as he would care about his own family? Yeah. So it's a very smart move by thinking. So then he's like, yeah, of course, that's no problem. So he took his wife and everyone along as well. But she passed away there though. After I believe that was his wife or one of the other Sahabiya. I think that was his wife actually. But she didn't pass away she passed away after she landed. The other's horse trampled on her accidentally, and then she passed away. But anyway, so the first 6 years was expansion, consolidation again. Last 6 years, that's when you had the rebels. That's when the Khawarij came different. They started objecting to Uthman's rule. Muslims started forming into sects, and they tried to overthrow Uthman, and Uthman radiallahu anhu was eventually assassinated by the Muslims, by a group of rebellion Muslims. So the last 6 years was basically decline. And Ali radiallahu anhu, he ruled for 5 years. In the early history of Islam, I'm going to finish in about 2 minutes. In the early history of Islam, there was a debate. Is Ali radiallahu anhu one of the rightly guided caliphs or not? Many said he's not. Many said he was not. Many of our Sunni Muslims said Ali radiallahu anhu was not part of the rightly guided caliphs. Many said he was, and this was a big debate within early Islam. Anyone know why this would be a matter of debate? Is it because he was a pious enough? Or because he was knowledgeable enough? Is it door to all knowledge?
Maybe the relationship with the Prophet.
That should strengthen it, isn't it?
Do they put the blame on him because of the stance that he took after Uthman passed away? More passive approach.
Many did, yeah, many did. So now, but that wasn't the main reason. The main reason was, okay, so after Uthman radiallahu anhu was assassinated by Muslims. So many Muslims that come from Egypt, that come from different places. So now for about a week, there's no Khalifa. Yeah, for about after Uthman's death, because this is so new to Islam. Like, how can you assassinate the Khalifa of the time? And not just any Khalifa, Uthman radiallahu anhu, everyone knew his status amongst the Sahaba. So what happened? So Uthman and Sir Ali, so no one was daring. So imagine, so now and who killed Uthman wasn't absolutely clear. Yes, it's not absolutely clear who killed Uthman. Now let's say as soon as Uthman passed away, you stand up for, you know what, I'm ready to take over him. What's going to happen to you? Was he involved? That's why no one wanted to take that thingy. And then after a week, people came to Ali radiallahu anhu and said, you need to be the Khalifa. There's no one better than you. So Ali, these people, he knew the situation. He knew that if he takes it, his life would be at risk. It's not an easy situation to go into, but their desire for the expansion and the protection of the Ummah was greater than their own preservation. So that's why he took on this task. And then as soon as he took on his task, his idea was, I need to consolidate the Muslim Ummah. We're all scattered at the moment. Let me establish my base. Let me establish my authority. And then later on, then I'll find those people who are involved in Uthman's killing. After I've consolidated my base, then I'll take them to task. That was his mindset. Yeah. And he couldn't do that from Medina. And want to know where he moved the Islamic capital? Good, to Kufa. In which country? Iraq. Yeah. So he had a lot of supporters there. And strangely enough, a lot of the people that participated in Uthman's killing were from Iraq as well. So it wasn't perhaps not such a great political move, yeah? In terms of your perception to the people. And not just that, many people that would attend Ali's lectures and his gatherings were people that were known to be involved in Uthman's killings. So imagine then, say, he had a couple of hundreds. Obviously, he can't control who comes in and out. And he doesn't know, but obviously they know amongst each other who's the bad people are. So they would actually be attending. And now Ali's reputation, look, these people are his killers. He's taken the Khilafah, he's moved to their base. And so it's not looking good. Yeah.
I was going to say, that right at the beginning, you mentioned that the Khilafah Rashidin was going to last for 30 years.
Yeah.
But without Ali, it doesn't calculate correctly.
Yeah.
So did they not take that calculation into consideration?
They would have, so they would have their own interpretation of it. So maybe up till the maximum is 30, not that it has to be 30. So there could be a different way of understanding them. So then what Muawiyah radiallahu anhu, like Brother Amir mentioned, he was from the same tribe as Uthman, wasn't it? They were from the same tribe, the Umayyad tribe. Muawiyah, the Khalifa to come later. So he thought, now this is my own family member that's got killed. And now the Khalifa today, he thought, you know what, Ali is compromised. Like he's given his soul to the devil. Like he's moved from Medina, he's moved it to Iraq. The Khawarij who participated, attending his gatherings, I don't accept him. Until he proves to me that he's a worthy Khalifa and he rounds up those people that were involved in Uthman's killing, and then I'll accept him to be a Khalifa. Because then it shows that, he's got backbone. He's not just doing what these rebellion groups want. So he refused to pledge his allegiance until Ali carried that out. And Ali said, I'm not going to carry that out until my base is sorted. Because who am I going to carry? I don't even know who the killers are. I start going after him and, I'm going to get attacked from the back because I need to consolidate my base first. Yeah. So Muawiyah, by this time, he had been a governor of Syria and the surrounding countries. He was made a governor, by the way, by Umar radiallahu anhu. So Umar radiallahu anhu made Muawiyah a governor in Syria and the surrounding areas. So he's been a governor since the time of Umar. So all of his people loved him. Yeah, so in Syria. So Ali's in Iraq on this side, in northeast. Muawiyah has a lot of support and power base in Syria because he's been their governor for so long. And they're very loyal to him. So now what happens was, all the people in Syria and the surrounding areas, they said, you know what, we're loyal to you, you're our Khalifa. And they would not pledge their allegiance to Ali. And Ali had his support in Iraq, and they said, you know what, and then that's when, so basically, Ali's rule actually never consolidated over Syria and all these places. And because the understanding of a Khalifa is one sole person who has full authority of the Muslim world. And because Ali did not have that, that's why the debate arose. Was he one of the rightly guided caliphs or not? And so that's why in the time of Ali, not much happened in terms of expansion or anything like that. He's just dealing with internal conflict. And from that day on, basically from the time of assassination of Uthman, that's when basically the moral decline of the Ummah started from early as Uthman radiallahu anhu. So just to finish off on, before we go for a break, actually, okay, this is too much. We're not going to go through any of this stuff. We'll go through this stuff next time. So next session, we're going to go through now. So basically, this was a bit of a background detail. So next session, I'm going to go through what happened in terms of fiqh in these eras, basically, and who the muftis of the Sahaba were and how they differed and so on and so on. So today is, I think, is a bit of a tangent actually. But inshallah, I hope everyone's on the same page in terms of any questions on this before I go for a break. Okay, so let's go for a quick 5-minute break, inshallah. Stop recording.